This man's mother did exactly that, and it was just the beginning of a nightmare that destroyed his marriage. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here I am. My marriage is seriously on the rocks, and I've come to realize that my mother, the woman who raised me, is at the heart of the problem. This is the story of how I almost lost everything because I couldn't see what was right in front of me. I'm 36 years old and my wife Sarah is 28. We've been married for 4 years, together for 6, and have a 1-year-old daughter, Lily, who is the light of my life. Sarah is an amazing mother and partner, patient, loving, and far more understanding than I probably deserve. My own mother, on the other hand, is something else entirely. For years, Sarah has tried to make me see that my relationship with my mother isn't healthy. My mom tries to control everything in my life, from what I wear to where we live, and even our wedding, which I convinced Sarah to let my mother plan. The wedding was a disaster, with my mother changing Sarah's choices behind her back, from the flowers to the cake flavor. Sarah is still resentful about that, and looking back, I can't blame her. I haven't been as firm with my mom as I should have been, always making excuses, always giving in. Your mother treats you like you're her husband, not her son, Sarah told me once, during one of our arguments. I dismissed it as an exaggeration, but that comment would come back to haunt me. My father died when I was 12, and my mother never remarried. My sister was sent to live with our aunt shortly after, as my mother claimed she couldn't handle 2 children on her own. So it was just my mother and me for most of my formative years. I became her emotional support, her confidant, her handyman, her everything. At the time, it felt normal. Now I see it was anything but. When I met Sarah at a friend's barbecue 6 years ago, my mother immediately disliked her. "She's not good enough for you," she said after their first meeting. "She's just after your money." This was laughable, considering I was a mid-level accountant with modest savings, but my mother said the same about every woman I ever dated. I should have seen the pattern. But everything changed on our wedding anniversary, when the invisible wedge my mother had been driving between us finally split our marriage wide open. We were tight on money, being new parents with modest jobs. Sarah had recently returned to work part-time as a graphic designer, and childcare costs were eating into our budget. So for our anniversary, I suggested that a family friend watch Lily while I bought a nice bottle of wine and we cooked dinner together at home. I could tell Sarah was disappointed we couldn't do anything more extravagant, but she agreed it was the best choice. We planned to both be home by 6 p.m. "I'll pick up some flowers on the way home," I promised that morning as we kissed goodbye. Sarah smiled, but I could see the wariness in her eyes. Our first year with Lily had been challenging, with sleepless nights and the constant demands of a newborn. This anniversary was supposed to be a chance to reconnect, to remember we were more than just parents. We were partnered. I was headed home from work, flowers in hand, when my mother called, claiming there was an emergency. She was crying frantically, begging me to come over. It was already 5:30 p.m., but I figured I could quickly check on my mom and still make it home in time. This was a pattern with my mother, creating emergencies that always seemed to coincide with important events in my life. But each time, I convinced myself this emergency might be real. When I arrived at my mother's house, she was sitting calmly on the couch, sipping wine and watching TV. There was no emergency. She just had household chores she wanted me to do: washing dishes, watering plants, cleaning gutters, things she was perfectly capable of doing herself. "Mom, it's my anniversary," I protested. "I told Sarah I'd be home by 6. "So your wife is more important than your mother now?" she replied, her voice taking on that wounded tone I knew so well. "After all I've sacrificed for you? I raised you alone, David. I gave up everything for you." I was livid, but she guilted me into helping her. "You're a bad son," she screamed at one point when I tried to leave. I texted Sarah that I'd be late, but she didn't respond. I should have walked out then, but years of conditioning kept me there, fixing a leaky faucet while my marriage was circling the drain. Before I knew it, it was 7:30 p.m. I finally put my foot down and left, despite my mother trying to pile on more tasks. "Just fix the cabinet door. It'll only take a minute," she pleaded as I headed for the door. I refused, and she switched to tears. "Fine, leave me alone in this house that's falling apart. I see where your priorities are." When I got home, Sarah wasn't there. The babysitter looked uncomfortable as she explained that Sarah had come home, waited for an hour, then called her parents to pick her up. I called and texted Sarah multiple times with no response. I tracked her phone and found she was at her parents' house, about 30 minutes away. I considered driving over, but decided to wait. I put the flowers in a vase, chilled the champagne, and waited. When she finally returned at 11 p.m., I greeted her with champagne and an apology, but her response shattered my world. "Save it for yourself," she said coldly. "I want a divorce." I broke down, begging her to reconsider, to try counseling. She refused. This wasn't about another person, she explained. It was about herself, about finally putting herself first after years of coming second to my mother. Even on our anniversary, my mother had managed to interfere. "This isn't just about tonight," Sarah said, her voice steady but her eyes brimming with tears. "It's about every holiday my parents haven't seen their granddaughter because we have to spend it with your mother. It's about every decision we've made as a couple that your mother has undermined. It's about the fact that you've never once chosen me over her." I tried to argue, to point out times I'd stood up to my mother, but the examples were few and unconvincing. Sarah just shook her head. "I've been patient, David. I've tried to understand that your relationship with your mother is complicated because of your father's death. But it's been 6 years, and nothing has changed. I can't compete with her anymore, and I shouldn't have to." My wife moved into our guest bedroom that night. When I tried to kiss her goodbye the next morning as she left to drop off Lily at daycare, she simply moved away. "Don't," she said quietly. "It's too late for that." I was devastated, but determined to fix things. I called in sick to work and spent the day researching marriage counselors. I posted online, seeking advice, and the responses were brutally honest. Everyone told me I needed to stand up to my mother and put my wife first. I knew they were right. One comment in particular stood out. "Your mother doesn't see your wife as family. She sees her as competition. And so far, she's winning." I resolved to set firm boundaries with my mother immediately. No more unannounced visits, no more emergencies that weren't emergencies, no more letting her dictate our family decisions. But things got worse before they got better. I spent that day cleaning the house, preparing Sarah's favorite meal, and rehearsing what I would say to her when she got home. I was ready to promise real change, to show her I understood the problem and was committed to fixing it. But the very next night, as Sarah and I were attempting an awkward conversation about our future, my mother showed up unannounced, something she did frequently. Sarah answered the door, and I heard my mother asking about our anniversary. Sarah called for me to handle my mother, which set my mom off. By the time I got downstairs, my mother was verbally attacking Sarah, calling her ungrateful and disrespectful. Instead of defending my wife, I asked Sarah what she'd said to provoke my mother. It was the wrong move, and Sarah stormed upstairs in tears. My mother then tried to convince me that Sarah was manipulating me, that she was trying to come between us. "She's isolating you from your family," my mother insisted. "That's what abusers do, David." For the first time, I saw clearly what was happening. My mother wasn't concerned about me being abused. She was projecting her own behavior onto Sarah. I asked my mother to leave, which sent her into a rage. She called me ungrateful and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall and shattered. That night, Sarah packed her things and our daughter's belongings and left to stay with her parents. "I need space to think," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "And you need space to decide what you really want." I was alone in our house, finally facing the consequences of years of enabling my mother's behavior. The silence was deafening. With Sarah gone, I had time to reflect. I blocked my mother on everything and invested in a home security system. I started therapy, something I'd always resisted. In those first sessions, my therapist, Dr. Chen, helped me see that if I was only there to save my marriage, I was missing the point. I needed to work on myself first. "Your relationship with your mother is what therapists call enmeshed," Dr. Chen explained. "The boundaries that should exist between parent and child are blurred or non-existent. Your mother relies on you for emotional support in ways that are inappropriate, and you've been conditioned to put her needs above your own." Meanwhile, Sarah and I entered a trial separation. We agreed on a schedule for me to see Lily, and our interactions were limited to discussions about our daughter. It was the most awful feeling, and I'd never felt so empty. But I was determined to be a good father to Lily, even if I couldn't save my marriage. As I continued therapy, I began to understand just how toxic my relationship with my mother had been. Dr. Chen helped me see patterns I'd been blind to, how my mother created crises to pull me away from Sarah, how she subtly undermined our relationship, how she positioned herself as the victim whenever I tried to establish boundaries. Your mother likely has undiagnosed personality issues, Dr. Chen suggested. But diagnosing her isn't our focus. Our focus is on helping you develop healthy boundaries and recognize manipulative behavior. I started to see progress in myself. I was sleeping better, I was more present with Lily during our time together, I was even having civil conversations with Sarah about co-parenting. But the worst was yet to come. My mother's behavior escalated dramatically. She sent letters threatening grandparents' rights. She showed up at Sarah's workplace demanding to see her. She even tried to confront us at grocery stores and restaurants. I documented everything and consulted with a lawyer about a restraining order. But the most shocking incident happened when I was at work. I received an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Inquiry." When I opened it, I found nude photos of my mother with captions saying, "Where's my sweet boy?" I was physically sick. I forwarded the email to our lawyer and spoke with my boss, who revealed he'd received similar inappropriate emails about me from the same address. It was clearly a setup to get me in trouble at work. This was the final confirmation that my mother's behavior wasn't just controlling, it was deeply disturbed. My therapist called it emotional incest, explaining that my mother viewed me as a replacement for my father, with herself as the mistress competing with my wife. This is beyond typical boundary issues, Dr. Chen said gravely. Your mother's behavior has crossed into potentially dangerous territory. I am concerned for your safety, Sarah's safety, and especially Lily's. I filed for a restraining order that day. The judge granted it immediately upon seeing the evidence. For the first time, I felt like I was taking real action to protect my family, even if that family was fractured. When I told Sarah about the photos, she was horrified but not surprised. "I always sensed something was off about how she looked at you," she admitted. "It made my skin crawl." Things came to a head when my mother showed up at our home in a frenzy, crying and banging on our front gate, demanding to speak to me. In the past, I would have let her in, tried to calm her down, given in to her demands. But this time, I called the police. As I watched from the window, my mother became more agitated when the officers arrived. She began making wild accusations about Sarah kidnapping Lily, about me being under Sarah's control. Then, in a move that shocked everyone, she pulled out a small pocket knife and made a shallow cut on her own arm. "Look what you made me do!" she screamed at me through the gate. "This is your fault!" The officers restrained her and called an ambulance. She was taken to the hospital and subsequently committed to a mental health facility for evaluation. The diagnosis confirmed what Dr. Chen had suspected: borderline personality disorder with histrionic features. With the immediate threat contained, Sarah approached me about finalizing our divorce. Despite months of playing house to maintain appearances for Lily, the damage was too severe. She had moved herself and our daughter back to her parents' house permanently and wanted to discuss our options with a lawyer. I couldn't blame her. When I asked if the good times had outweighed the bad, she gave me a stern look and said, "Our relationship has been almost nothing but bad," and walked away. Through therapy, I've learned painful truths about my relationship with my mother. She views me as a husband figure, not a son. She sees my wife as competition, not family. She's never properly grieved my father's death. She's rejected every girlfriend I've ever had. Years of manipulation made me believe her behavior was normal. I feel robbed of a normal life, but I'm also finding hope. At 36, I still have time to build a healthy future and be the father my daughter deserves. My mother remained in the psychiatric unit for 2 weeks. Upon release, she went to live with my aunt in another state. The restraining order remains in effect, and I've made it clear to everyone in our extended family that I will not hesitate to enforce it. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable. Sarah and I agreed on joint custody of Lily, with Sarah having primary physical custody. I see my daughter 3 days a week and every other weekend. It's not the family life I imagined, but I'm grateful for every moment with Lily. 6 months have passed since my mother's breakdown. Sarah has begun dating again, a teacher at Lily's preschool. When she told me, it hit me hard, the final confirmation that I couldn't win her back. She's done with the drama and doesn't want to raise our daughter in an unhealthy environment. He's good with Lily, Sarah told me during one of our handoffs, but I've been clear with him about boundaries. He understands and respects your role in her life. I'm not ready to date yet. I'm still working through my feelings in therapy, still learning what healthy relationships look like, but for the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. Not my mother, not even my failed marriage, but my own healing. One weekend, I took Lily to the park and struck up a conversation with another single parent. We talked easily about our children, the neighborhood, normal things. It was refreshing to have an interaction untainted by the drama of my past. I'm not ready for a relationship, but that simple conversation gave me hope that normal connections are possible. My mother remains in treatment, and I maintain strict boundaries. My focus is on being the best father I can be and building a life free from toxic influences. I want Lily to grow up understanding healthy relationships and boundaries, things I never learned as a child. It's a bittersweet ending to what I thought would be my happily ever after, but perhaps it's not an ending at all, just the painful beginning of a healthier chapter. Sometimes the most important relationships to save aren't the ones we think. Sometimes we need to save ourselves first. Looking back on everything that's happened, I realize how much I've changed in such a short time. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined standing up to my mother or recognizing her behavior as harmful. I was blind to the damage being done to my marriage, to my own sense of self. Dr. Chen says this kind of awakening is both painful and necessary. It's like having surgery, she told me during one of our sessions. It hurts, but it's removing something toxic that would eventually kill you. The hardest lesson I've learned is that love isn't supposed to be painful or controlling. Real love, healthy love, gives people space to be themselves. My mother's version of love was possession, disguised as affection. She didn't love me as a son. She loved me as an extension of herself, a replacement for my father, a source of emotional fulfillment that should have come from appropriate relationships with other adults. I've also learned that enabling someone's toxic behavior isn't kindness, it's complicity. Every time I gave in to my mother's demands, every time I chose her over Sarah, I was helping to destroy my own marriage. I thought I was being a good son, but I was being a terrible husband and setting a poor example for my daughter. Sarah and I talk more openly now that we're not trying to save our marriage. During one conversation, she admitted she saw the warning signs early on, but hoped I would change after we had Lily. I thought becoming a father would help you see how unhealthy your relationship with your mother was, she explained. I thought you'd want to protect Lily from that dynamic. She was right, but it took losing everything to make me see it. Now protecting Lily from unhealthy relationships, including with her grandmother, is my priority. My sister, who I rarely spoke to after she was sent away, reached out after hearing about our mother's breakdown. We've started rebuilding our relationship, comparing notes on our childhood and supporting each other through the complex emotions of having a parent with mental illness. I always felt guilty for leaving you alone with her, my sister confessed during one of our calls. But I was just a kid too. I couldn't have saved you. We're saving ourselves now, I told her, and it's true. As for my mother, I've accepted that she may never change. The therapist at the facility where she was treated explained that personality disorders are deeply ingrained and difficult to treat, especially when the person doesn't believe they have a problem. My mother still maintains that she's the victim in all this, that Sarah stole me from her, that I've been brainwashed, that everyone is against her. I've had to accept that the mother I needed, the one who would put my happiness above her own, who would celebrate my marriage rather than sabotage it, who would love my child without trying to control her, never existed. I've had to grieve that loss, even as I maintain firm boundaries with the mother I actually have. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when I miss the family life I thought I had, when I wish I could turn back time and see the warning signs earlier, But then I look at Lily, at her innocent smile and trusting eyes, and I know I'm doing the right thing by breaking this cycle. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe Sarah and I could have worked things out if I'd recognized the problem sooner. Maybe we were always destined to part ways. What I do know is that I'm becoming someone I can be proud of, someone who understands boundaries, who recognizes manipulation, who puts his child's well-being above all else. And that, in the end, is the most important thing I could have saved.